Crystal Cave by Mary Stewart. Book 3, The Wolf. 4. Cadle had brought more than a flask with him. He had brought food, salt mutton and bread, and last season's olives in a bottle with their own oil. We sat in the lee of the wood and ate, while the cob grazed near us, and below in the distance the placid curves of the river glimmered through the April green of the fields and the young wooded hills. The mist had cleared, and it was a beautiful day. "Well," said Cadle at length, "what's to do?" "We go see my mother, if she's still there, of course." Then, with a savagery that broke through me so suddenly that I had hardly known it was there, "By Mithras, I'd give a lot to know who did that up yonder." "Why, who could it be except Vortigern?" "Vortimer, Pesentius, anyone. When a man's wise and gentle and good," I added bitterly. "It seems to me that any man's every man's hand is against him. Galapus could have been murdered by an outlaw for food, or a herdsman for shelter, or a passing soldier for a drink of water." "That was no murder." "What then?" "I meant that was done by more than one. Men in a pack are worse than lone ones. At a guess, it was Vortigern's men on their way up from the town." "You're probably right. I shall find out." "You think you'll get to see your mother?" "I can try." Did he have any messages for her? It was, I suppose, the measure of my relationship with Cadle that he dared to ask the question. I answered him quite simply. "If you mean, did Ambrosius ask me to tell her anything? No, he left it to me. What I do tell her depends entirely on what's happened since I left. I'll talk to her first and judge how much to tell her after that. Don't forget, I haven't seen her for a long time, and people change. I mean, their loyalties change. Look at mine. When I last saw her, I was only a child, and I have only a child's memories. For all I know, I misunderstood her utterly, the way she thought and the things she wanted. Her loyalties may lie elsewhere, not just the church, but the way she feels about Ambrosius. The gods know there'd be no blame to her if she had changed. She owed Ambrosius nothing. She took good care of that." He said thoughtfully, his eyes on the green distance threaded by the glinting river. "The nunnery hadn't been touched." "Exactly. Whatever happened to the rest of the town, Vortigern had let St. Peter's be. So you see, I have to find out who is in which camp before I give any messages. What she hasn't known about for all these years, it won't hurt her to go on not knowing for as many more days. What happens with Ambrosius coming soon? I mustn't take the risk of telling her too much." I began to pack away the remains of the meal while I sat, chin on hand, thinking, my eyes on the bright distance. I added slowly, "It's simple enough to find out where Vortigern is now. And if Hengist's landed already, and with how many men, Merrick will probably find out without too much trouble. But there were other soundings the Count wanted me to take, things they'll hardly know about in the nunnery. So now that Galapus is dead, I'll have to try elsewhere. We'll wait here till dusk, then go down to St. Peter's. My mother will be able to tell me who I can still go to in safety." I looked at him. "Whatever king she favors, she's not likely to give me away." "That's true enough. Well, let's hope they'll let her see you." "If she knows who's asking for her, I imagine it will take more than a word from the abbess to stop her from seeing me. Don't forget, she's still a king's daughter." I lay back on the warm grass, my hands behind my head. Even if I'm not yet a king's son? But king's son or no, there was no getting into the nunnery. I had been right in thinking there had been no damage done here. The high walls loomed unbroken and unscarred, and the gates were new and solid of oak, hinged and bolted with iron. They were fast shut. Nor, mercifully, did any welcoming torch burn outside. The narrow street was empty and unlit in the early dusk. At our urgent summons, a small square window in the gate opened, and an eye was applied to the grille. "Travellers from Cornwall," I said softly. "I must have word with Lady Ninian." "The lady who?" The lady who? It was the flat, toneless voice of the deaf. Wondering irritably why a deaf portress should be put at the gate. I raised my voice a little, going closer to the grill. The Lady Ninian. I don't know what she calls herself now, but she was the sister of the late king. Is she with you still? Aye, but she'll see you, Willie. It's in a letter you have. She can read. No, I must have speech with her. Go and take word to her. Tell her it's one of her family. Her family? I thought I saw a flicker of interest in the eyes. They're most of them dead and gone. Do you not get news in Cornwall? Her brother, the king, died in battle last year, and the children have gone to vault again. Her own son's been dead these 5 years. I know that. I'm not her brother's family, and I'm as loyal as she is to the High King. Go and tell her that, and look, take this for your devotions. A pouch passed through the grill and was grabbed in a quick monkey snatch. I'll take a message for you. Give me your name. I don't say she'll see you, mind, but I'll take her your name. My name's Emrys. I hesitated. She knew me once. Tell her that, and hurry. We'll wait here. It was barely 10 minutes before I heard the steps coming back. For a moment I thought it might be my mother, but it was the same old eyes that peered at me through the grill. The same clawed hand laying hold of the bars. She'll see you. Oh, not now, young master. You can't come in. No, she can't come out yet. Not till prayers is over. She'll meet you on the river walk, she says. There's another gate in the wall there. But not to let anyone see you. We'll be careful. Very careful. Very well, we'll be careful. I could see the whites of the eyes turning as she tried to see me in the shadows. No use done straight away, Emrys, eh? Well, don't worry that I'll say aught. These be troubled times, and the least said the better, no matter what about. What time? An hour after moonrise. You'll hear the bell. I'll be there, I said, but the grill was already shut. There was a mist rising again from the river. This would help, I thought. We went quietly down the lane which skirted the nunnery walls. It led away from the streets, down towards the towpath. What now? Asked Cadle. It's 2 hours yet till moonrise, and by the look of the night, we'll be lucky if we ever see a moon at all. You'll not risk going into the town. No, but there's no sense in waiting about in this drizzle. We'll find a place out of the wet where we can hear the bell this way. The stable-yard gate was locked. I wasted no time on it, but led the way to the orchard wall. No lights showed in the palace. We scrambled over where the wall was broken and walked up through the damp grass of the orchard and into my grandfather's garden. The air was heavy with the smell of damp earth and growing things, mint and sweetbriar, and moss and young leaves heavy with wet. Last year's ungathered fruit squelched under our feet. Behind us the gate creaked emptily. The colonnades were empty. The doors shut, the shutters fastened close over the windows. The place was all darkness and echoes and the scuttle of rats, but there was no damage that I could see. I suppose that, when Vortigern took the town, he had meant to keep the house for himself and had somehow persuaded or forced his Saxons to bypass it in their looting, from fear of the bishops, he had forced them to bypass St. Peter's. So much the better for us. We should at least have a dry and comfortable wait. My time with Thromornis had been wasted, indeed, if I could not have picked every lock in the place. I was just saying as much to Cadle when suddenly round the corner of the house, treading softly as a cat on the mossy flagstones, came a young man walking fast. He stopped dead at the sight of us, and I saw his hand flash down to his hip. But even while Cadle's weapon hissed free of its sheath in reply, the young man peered, stared, and exclaimed, "Merthin, by the holy oak!" For a moment I genuinely didn't recognize him, which was understandable, since he was not much older than myself, and had changed as much in 5 years. Then, unmistakably, I saw who he was. Broad shoulders, thrusting jaws, hair that even in the twilight showed red. Dinius, who had been the prince and king's son when I was a nameless bastard. Dinius, my cousin, who would not even recognize that much of a tie with me, but who had claimed the title of prince for himself, and been allowed to get away with it. He would hardly now be taken for a prince. Even in the fading light I could see that he was dressed not poorly, but in clothes that a merchant might have worn, and had only one jewel, an arm-ring of copper. His belt was of plain leather, his sword hilt plain also, and his cloak, though of good stuff, was stained and frayed at the edge. About his whole person was that indefinable air of seediness which comes from relentless calculation from day to day, or perhaps even from meal to meal. Since, in spite of the considerable changes, he was still indisputably my cousin Dinius, it was to be supposed that once he had recognized me, there was little point in pretending he was wrong. I smiled and held out my hand. Welcome, Dinius. Yours is the first first known face I've seen today. What in the name of the gods are you doing here? Everyone said you were dead, but I didn't believe it. His big head thrust out, peering close, as the quick eyes looked me up and down. Wherever you were, you've done all right, seemingly. How long have you been back? We came today. And you've heard the news. I knew Camlac was dead. I'm sorry about that, if you were. As you'll know, he was no friend of mine, but that was hardly political. I paused, waiting. Let him make the moves. I saw from the corner of an eye that Cadle was tensed and watchful, a hand still on his hip. I moved my own hand, palm downward, in a slight flattening movement, and saw him relax. Dinius lifted a shoulder. Camlac? He was a fool. I told him which way the wolf would jump. But as he spoke, I saw his eyes slide sideways toward the shadows. It seemed that men watched their tongues these days in Moradunham. His eyes came back to me, suspicious and wary. What's your business here, anyway? Why did you come back? To see my mother. I've been in Cornwall, and all we got there was rumours of fighting. And when I heard Camlac was dead in Vortimer, I wondered what had happened at home. Well, she's alive. You'll have found that out? The High King, rather loudly, respects the church. I doubt if you'll get to see her though. You're probably right. I went up to the nunnery and they wouldn't let me in. But I'll be here a few days. I'll send a message in. If she wants to see me, I imagine she'll find a way of doing so. But at least I know she's safe. It's a real stroke of luck running into you like this. You'll be able to give me the rest of the news. I had no idea what I might find here. So as you see, I came in this morning quietly, alone with my servant. Quietly is right. I thought you were thieves. You're lucky I didn't cut you down and ask questions afterwards. It was the old Dinius, the bullying note there again, the immediate response to my mild, excusing tone. Well, I wasn't taking any risks till I knew how the family stood. I went off to St. Peter's. I waited till dusk to do that. Then I came to take a look around. Is the place empty, then? I'm still living here. Where else? Arrogance rang as hollow as the empty colonnade, and for a moment I felt tempted to ask him for hospitality and see what he would say. As if the thought had struck him at the same moment, he said quickly, Cornwall, eh? What's the news from there? They say Ambrosius's messengers are scuttling across the narrow sea like waterflies. I laughed. I wouldn't know. I've been leading a sheltered life. You picked the right place. The contempt that I remembered so well was back in his voice. They say old Gorlois spent the winter snugged down in bed with a girl barely turned 20 and left the rest of the kings to play their own games out in the snow. They said she'd make Helen of Troy look a market woman. What's she like? I never saw her. He's a jealous husband. Jealous of you? He laughed and followed it with a comment that made Cadle behind me suck in his breath, but the jibe had put my cousin back in humour and off his guard. I was still. The little bastard, cousin and of no account. He added, Well, it would suit you. We had a peaceful winter with your goatish old duke, while the rest of you had a peaceful winter, you with your goatish old duke, while the rest of us tramped the country after the Saxons. So he had fought with Camlac and Vortimer. It was what I had wanted to know. I said mildly, I was hardly responsible for the Duke's policy, nor am I now. Ha! It's as well for you. You know he was in the north with Vortigern? I knew he had left to join him. At Caernarvon, was it? Are you going up there yourself? I put the gentlest of queries into my voice, adding meekly, I wasn't really in a position to hear much news that mattered. The chill current of air eddied, loaded with damp between the pillars. From some broken gutter above us, water suddenly spilled over to splash between us on the flagstones. I saw him gather his cloak round him. "Why are we standing here?" He spoke with a brusque heartiness that ran as false as the arrogance. "Come and exchange news over a flask of wine, eh?" I hesitated, but only for a moment. It seemed obvious that Dinius had his own reasons for keeping out of the High King's eye. For one thing, if he had managed to live down his association with Camlac, he would surely be with Vortigern's army, not skulking here in this threadbare fashion in an empty palace. For another, now that he knew I was in Maradunum, I preferred to keep him under my eye than leave him now to go and talk to whom he would, so I accepted with every appearance of flattered pleasure, only insisting that he must join me for supper, if he could tell me where a good meal was to be found and a warm seat out of the wet. Almost before the words were out, he had me by the arm and was hurrying me across the atrium and out through the street door. Fine. There's a place over on the west side, beyond the bridge. The food's good, and they get the kind of clients that mind their own business." He winked. Not that you'll be wanting to bother with a girl, eh? Though you don't look as if they'd made a clerk of you after all. Well, no more for now. It doesn't do to look as though you've too much talk about these days. It doesn't look as though you've too much to talk about these days. You either fall foul of the Welsh or you fall foul of Vortigern, and the place is crawling with his spies just now. I don't know who it is they're looking for, but there's a story going on. No, take your trash away." This to a beggar who thrust a tray of rough-cut stones and leather laces in front of us. The man moved back without a word. I saw that he was blind in one eye from a cut. A hideous scar ran right up one cheek, and it flattened the bridge of his nose. It looked as if it had been a sword cut. I dropped a coin on the tray as we passed. Dinius shot me a look that was far from friendly. "Times have changed, eh? You must have struck it rich in Cornwall. Tell me what happened that night. Did you mean to set the whole damned place on fire?" "I'll tell you all about it over supper," I said, and would say no more till we reached the shelter of the tavern and got a bench in the corner with our backs to the wall. And that is the end of chapter 4.